Back again with another original series season story told. In this video, I'm going to be telling the story of Season 2 of the hit thriller series How to Get Away with Murder. If you want to watch the first season story before this one, I did a video for that season and will list the link in the description below. I am planning on doing all 6 seasons in the near future, so the whole series will be available on the channel soon. If you just want to recap a single episode of the season, you will also find the episode timestamps in the description below. I am putting out a spoiler alert right now, and since it is a long season, I am going to get right to it. Episode 1. It's time to move on. Picking up where the season left out, Annalise, Frank, and Bonnie are trying to get everybody back on the same page. Remember, to close out Season 1, Annalise and Frank found Rebecca dead in the basement, but no one else knows about it, including Wes. Wes has been acting out recently because Rebecca's disappearance isn't making sense, especially after being given a not guilty verdict for the murder of Lila. Frank believes he is acting because he is the one that killed Rebecca, but Annalise says not a chance he would do that to the girl he loved. Annalise and the Keating Five take on a new case for a pair of adopted siblings, Caleb and Catherine, who are believed to have murdered their filthy rich parents. Frank gives Wes some bait to see if he will admit to Rebecca's disappearance, but he comes to the conclusion Wes didn't do it, so the next person he thinks of is his boo, Laurel. Annalise then realizes it had to be Bonnie, as she's the only one that makes sense for the time and location. Nate is still being accused of murdering Sam, and Annalise knows she can't be his lawyer for obvious reasons, so she calls her old friend, Eve, to come to town and take on his case. At first, Eve doesn't want to be included in Annalise's drama, but after Annalise explains everything, they share a steamy kiss together. Apparently, they used to be a thing back in college. Annalise left her for her professor at the time, Sam. Eve then says she will do it and defend Nate. It is also shown that Asher is now spying on Annalise in conjunction with the ADA of the trial. We then get the infamous flash forward that this show loves to use, and we see 2 months in the future. A gunshot is heard and then Wes starts running away from the house. The episode ends with us showing Annalise as the victim. Did Wes shoot his teacher? Episode 2. She's dying. The episode opens with Caleb and Catherine brought in for questioning as their aunt has recently been found dead as well. Annalise asks them if they had anything to do with her death, and they say no. They were with each other that night, which we see is a lie. At the start of Nate's trial, the prosecutor, Sinclair, insinuates that Annalise and Eve have history together, and that is the reason she is defending Nate, not because she wants to. Sinclair also theorizes that Nate and Annalise worked together to kill Sam so they could be together. Sinclair even questions this when she takes the stand and Annalise admits to the affair, but not about planning a murder. Annalise does testify that she thinks Nate killed Sam, which is perjury by the way, and then Eve shreds into her on cross, accusing her also of killing Sam. I think this is what Annalise wants, to be portrayed as the killer because there is no evidence to say she did it, and this can get Nate freed as well. That way neither goes down for it. Frank does some digging and he learns from police files that Caleb's DNA was found at his aunt's crime scene. When they confront Caleb about this, he says he went for a run and briefly stopped by his aunt's, but is being framed for her murder. A little later in the episode, the team uncovers that police planted Caleb's DNA at the crime scene so Annalise is able to get his charges dropped, for the murder of his aunt at least. Also, Nate is released from custody as the judge feels there's not enough to say he killed Sam definitively. After the day of court, Eve heads over to spend some time with Annalise, and they end up spending the night together and share a kiss on her balcony, which Nate sees. Then we do a flash forward with Wes meeting Laurel and Michaela outside the mansion, and they all storm inside to see Connor doing everything he can to save Annalise. They tell him they have to leave, so they run out of the house, and then we see another dead body outside, the prosecutor Sinclair. Episode 3. It's called The Octopus. The episode opens with Annalise bleeding out receiving a call from Nate, but she can barely breathe and she misses the call. Back to 2 months earlier, Annalise calls Wes over to her house to talk about things and see if she can convince him Rebecca is okay. It doesn't really work too well. The Keating Five then take on a new case of a sex therapist that had a patient die of a heart attack while she was treating him. Apparently, she was doing more than therapy and was hooking up with the patient as well by the means of illegal sex parties. Annalise instructs the others to find someone else that was at the party that night and see if they can testify or if they get bad vibes from them and they can direct the attention that way. She doesn't care who goes down for it, just anyone, but her client. What a lawyer. Apparently, what really happened was the client, Tanya, was in love with the man that died and she wanted his wife to find out about the affair and leave him, but he suffered a heart attack after combining nitroglycerin with Viagra. Annalise is able to pin the murder on his jealous wife, and Tanya goes free. We then learn that Asher has been trying to secretly record Annalise in her home with a recorder, and he is doing this because Sinclair has some major dirt on him that she is blackmailing him with that involves some girl named Tiffany and then a spot called Trotter Lake. Sinclair wants to take Annalise down bad for the murder of Sam. Bonnie notices Asher has been distant lately, and she thinks he is seeing someone else, and he doesn't deny it. Obviously doesn't want anyone to know about this incident. Back to the Hapstall case, Frank has uncovered that the housekeeper leaded a photo of Caleb and Catherine that insinuates they are in an incestuous relationship. Also, I don't think I have introduced Oliver in the series yet. He is Connor's boyfriend and smart tech genius guy that does the hacking for the group. Also, a guy named Levi has made his way into town that turns out to be Rebecca's foster brother, and he wants answers. No one knows this yet except the viewers, and Michaela has taken a liking to him. Annalise heads to Nate's house to try and apologize about everything, but he doesn't want to talk to her, and then we see Wes is inside his house with him seemingly working together about something. The episode ends back 2 months later where Nate has approached the students at the mansion outside and tells them to get in the car. Episode 4. Skanks gets shanked. Annalise receives a call from Nate's wife, Nia, who has cancer and bashes Annalise for sleeping with a married man's sick wife. Nia asks Annalise to end her life for her, but Annalise wants no part of that. Nia says she just wants the pain of everything to stop. The case for this episode is Zoe Mitchell, who is a teenager that is accused of killing another teenage girl at school. She admitted to doing it, but says she was forced to do it by 2 other girls that said they would do it to her if she failed to kill the other girl. Laurel begins to think this Zoe chick is a sociopath and that she really should be punished for her actions. Laurel even steals Zoe's phone one day and sees a video of Zoe and her friends mocking the dead girl and reenacting the murder she committed. The video is shown to the court, and when Zoe takes the stand, she has a breakdown and says she is not all there mentally. Really seems like a cop-out to me, but it works and she is given an insanity verdict. Asher continues to turn in evidence to Sinclair about Annalise, and the case just keeps building stronger. Nate tells Wes and Levi that the night Rebecca seemingly disappeared. Apparently Frank called someone 3 times for quite a while from his phone. Levi then tracks the woman that he called and finds out her brother is one of Frank's old college buddies who works at a cemetery, so Nate wonders if they killed and buried Rebecca's body there. Back to the 2 months later flash forward, and Annalise is being rushed to the hospital and Nate takes the rest of them to Wes's apartment, and when Michaela goes to the door, she is met by Caleb who asks, "How is she?" And Michaela tells him good. Episode 5. Meet Bonnie. A wiretapping hearing is held in hopes of bugging the Keating house, but Asher bails at the last second and doesn't appear. His testimony was needed to proceed. He's obviously very conflicted on what to do. Asher meets up with Bonnie, and Bonnie tells Asher a fake story about Sam forcing himself on her one night, and she hit him upside his head with a lamp and he died. Bonnie was asked to create this fake story by Annalise and Frank as they are starting to sniff out that Asher is working with the feds, and since he is the one Keating 5 member that wasn't present that night, they have to get him on their side. They know how he feels about Bonnie and don't think he would turn Bonnie in for Sam's murder. In the meantime, Annalise tells Frank to find out what Wes and Nate are really up to, and she will meet with Asher and set the story straight and ask him not to expose Bonnie as a murderer. At the courthouse, Annalise is doing her best to get the siblings' aunt's testimony thrown out in court now that she is dead. They get help from their genius hacker Oliver, who produces an audio clipping of the aunt going on a racist rant the morning after the parents' murder, insinuating she thought it was someone else, not Caleb or Catherine. The tape doesn't work to get her testimony removed, and it is still a part of the trial. Sinclair continues to get Asher to work with him and says his baggage won't be revealed, but he is still wary of the situation and then learns his dad is talking with the feds too. His dad is receiving his own heat from the last season in regards to his unethical judge decisions. Annalise continues to try and figure out why Wes and Nate have been secretly meeting, but she can't uncover much information in the time being. Frank finds out who Levi is, and he sets up a trap that gets him arrested for drug possession, so his character can take a hit. He also leaves clues for Wes that guides him to a storage unit where Wes thinks Rebecca's body is, but all that is there is a suitcase full of cash. The ending flash forward shows Bonnie running from the mansion the shooting night, and she drives off with Asher in his car. They stop so she can clean off blood, but while she is doing that, Asher bails and heads to the police station to give a statement. Episode 6. 2 birds, 1 millstone. After spending the night together, Laurel starts going through Frank's stuff to see if he can find more information about Rebecca's disappearance, as she has been talking a lot with Wes recently and is starting to believe they did something to her. Annalise convinces Asher to not rat out Bonnie, and they will figure out a way to protect her if she is prosecuted. Annalise receives a call from an old friend, Jill, who is being accused of murdering her husband. The police are accusing Jill of killing her husband when he found out that Jill was transgender, when in all reality, it's because her husband was abusive as hell, but that doesn't sound as good to the prosecution. Annalise talks to the DA and is able to get the charges dismissed and get Sinclair off of her back in exchange for information that ends up with the DA convicting Asher's father of all of his crimes and conspiracies. The Keating Five are trying to find someone else that they can direct the attention to in regards to the Hapstall case, and they discover that the dead aunt had a mystery son that lived close by and would inherit a ton of money if the Hapstall parents and aunt both were dead. Kinda strange this mystery son would receive the money instead of Caleb and Catherine, but that gives someone else motive for the murders. Oliver hacks this mystery man's computer. He is a good hacker too and hacks Oliver back, and they can see and hear each other's conversations. Wes talks with Annalise outside of Nate's apartment one day, and she continues to tell him she doesn't know where Rebecca is, but he isn't buying it. While this is happening, we see Frank dumping Rebecca's body in the woods. The ending episode flash-forwards show Frank at the hospital with Annalise begging for them to save her life, and when he leaves, we see Catherine in the back seat of his car. He then takes her to a wooded area and leaves her there alive. Episode 7. I Want You to Die. This episode opens up with Annalise and the Keating Five finding out everything they can about this Philip fella who is the mystery son of the aunt that was mentioned in the last episode. They want to direct all of the media attention towards him and away from the Hapstall siblings. It is then shown that Nia has died, presumably from her cancer, but Sinclair wants to charge Nate for her death. This Sinclair lady is a complete nut. Imagine having to spend every day with this woman. I feel bad for her husband if she is married. Eve represents Nate once again, but Annalise doesn't think she is doing her best to defend him and confronts her about this. Eve tells Annalise she has a plan and to be patient. She turns out to be telling the truth when she gets a blood sample switched, and this clears Nate of any charges. Gotta love unethical lawyers who will do anything to win. Annalise and Eve are perfect for each other. While celebrating, Annalise and Eve discuss Wes, and Annalise says that Wes is a very important person from her past, which we knew there was something there. She seemed highly focused on him in Season 1. Asher then comes clean to Bonnie about the Trotter Lake incident. Apparently, this Tiffany chick was assaulted at the lake and he was responsible for it because he threw the party, but wasn't involved in what actually happened. Bonnie yells at him and tells him he is despicable for not doing anything to stop it and doesn't know if she can ever look at him the same way now. Asher then tells Bonnie that Annalise showed him a video of her and her father, and apparently her father used to abuse Bonnie when she was younger. That is partially why Annalise took her in. She saw how damaged she was. Bonnie is unbelievably frustrated with Annalise and scolds her and tells her she wishes she were dead. Meanwhile, the team is still focused on Philip, and while everyone is out, Philip shows up at Oliver's apartment. The flash-forwards then show Michaela, Connor, Wes, and Laurel leaving the mansion with Wes holding the gun as we saw earlier. As they are talking outside on what to do, Sinclair's body comes from above and smashes onto the ground. They then look up at the balcony and see Bonnie. Episode 8. Hi, I'm Philip. The episode opens up with a flash-forward this time of Bonnie asking Connor if it was his idea, and he tells her it was. Back to 2 months earlier, and Nate shows up at Annalise's house to finally talk about everything that has happened between them. Connor and the rest of the Keating Five then show up at the house as well, and Connor tells Annalise that Oliver is missing. Nate starts to call the police, and right after he gets on the phone, Oliver walks in with none other than Philip. Philip tells them he is innocent of the Hapstall murders, and he never even spoke a word to any of them and doesn't know why he would inherit their fortune. He says the Hapstalls must have hated their 2 adopted kids if they weren't included in the will at all, and maybe that's why they murdered their parents. A few days later, Annalise is hit with a ton of discovery papers for the case, and she even offers Caleb and Catherine plea deals if they plead guilty. Catherine doesn't want the deal, but Caleb offers to do 30 years if that means Catherine can go scot-free. He must really love his sister. Annalise wants Michaela to convince Caleb to not settle for a plea deal. Asher soon discovers that Sinclair has bugged the house with the discovery paperwork that Annalise received, and Annalise wants to use this to her advantage in the case. Annalise comes up with an idea to get Sinclair to search the Hapstall basement for the murder weapon and take her off the scent a bit, and then the plea deal expires. Philip goes to the police station to file a report, and Nate is able to switch the file before anyone can see it and intends to make him look crazy. Frank then uncovers DNA that proves Philip was at the crime scene and also explains that Philip was the product of incest between Helena, the aunt, and Grant, the Hapstall father. There's now location and motive for Philip to kill. Meanwhile, Michaela has been getting close with Caleb, and Caleb tells her he found a gun in a vent, and he wonders if Catherine did commit the murders with that gun and then she hid it. The episode ends with Philip and Catherine secretly meeting up. Episode 9. What do we do? Michaela calls Connor to the house and she tells him about the gun that Caleb found and wants to know what to do or who to tell. Michaela thinks Catherine did the murders and acted alone. Caleb wasn't involved. While this is going on, Annalise can't seem to track down Catherine and thinks she may have ran away. Sinclair outs Nate in the police station about doctoring Philip's file, and he absolutely blows up at her, and she then files harassment charges. My guy Nate just can't catch a break, man. To be fair though, he did switch Philip's file illegally. A little later, she finds him and says they can have a clean slate and work with each other to get back at Annalise for everything she has done. You couldn't have talked to him before the big blow-up in front of everyone? Sadly, Asher's father ended his life because everything was made public, including his fraudulent judging and Asher's Trotter Lake incident. Asher's mom blames him for everything, and this causes Asher to break down. In retaliation, Asher runs over Sinclair in the parking garage and kills her. Now Asher is a murderer too. He finally fits in with the others. He calls Bonnie for help and Bonnie helps him take the body to the mansion, and when Annalise finds out, she tells the other Keating four they're going to help cover up Sinclair's murder and tell Asher about Sam's murder, so they all are in this together and no one can blackmail anyone else. Michaela and Connor want no part of this plan. But do they really have a choice? I guess go to prison is the other option. We then see Bonnie and Asher throw her off the balcony as we saw in the last episode. Annalise then wants to blame everything on Catherine and wants Frank to kidnap her and bring her there. Annalise then concludes she needs to be shot to make it look real, and no one will do it until she yells at Wes that she killed Rebecca, and this pisses him off, and he shoots her in the gut. As she falls to the ground, she whispers the name Christoph to him. Then a flashback shows a young Christoph sitting in a police interrogation room after his mother died, and we can see Annalise and Eve looking on, finally getting some answers. Episode 10. What happened to you, Annalise? After Annalise is shot, Laurel for some reason takes the blame for shooting her, and then Wes says he will dispose of the gun. Wes doesn't know what to think after hearing his childhood name come out of Annalise's mouth. We then jump 2 weeks later where Annalise has survived and is heading home from the hospital. She takes some pain meds and starts hallucinating a woman dropping off a baby on her front porch. Elsewhere, Wes is really struggling with the trauma that he got after shooting his law school teacher in the gut, and also dealing with the fact that Rebecca was murdered, the woman he was in love with. Everyone meets together, and they get their stories straight with one another and how they are going to pin it on Catherine. At her preliminary hearing, Annalise comes in and testifies in front of the court about representing Catherine and her privilege she was supposed to have with her lawyer that Annalise broke. The statement is inadmissible in trial after this, but the court still heard it obviously. Annalise then goes to talk with Caleb, and she tries to feed him the story about Catherine shooting her, but Caleb doesn't know what to do. Wes is still trying to do any research he can about how Annalise could be connected with him as a child, but can't find very much about his mother's death. He goes to Annalise and straight up asks her how she knows about the name Christoph, but Annalise doesn't tell him much and says that he ruined her. The episode ends with a flashback 10 years ago, revealing a pregnant Annalise who is meeting with Christoph's mom in a park. Episode 11. She hates us. Asher hasn't really had a place to stay recently, so he has been crashing with Connor and Oliver, but Oliver is starting to get sick of him and is tired of Asher's poor me attitude. Connor doesn't have the heart to kick him out, especially after his father just dying. Wes has also been admitted into a psych ward after threatening to take himself out, and some roommates overheard him. Laurel goes to visit him and wants to help get him out, and this causes her to go talk to Annalise and begs her to get him out of there. He doesn't belong there. The doctor believes Annalise's shooting made him think about his mother's death 10 years ago and triggered those memories. We then start to see the flashbacks and how Frank came to be Sam's hitman, if you want to call it, and how they met. Frank was in prison and was meeting with Sam for a psych evaluation, and he saw good in Frank and wanted to help him out. Frank then convinced Annalise to hire him as a paralegal for her law firm, despite having no history in anything law-related, well, except breaking it. This is why Frank owed Sam a favor and why he told him to kill Lila. Also in the 10 years ago flashback, we see Bonnie helping a pregnant Annalise get comfortable. Sam was Bonnie's counselor as well because she suffered that abuse from her father her whole childhood. We then learn that Annalise was working a federal case where Rose, Christoph's mother, was a witness in a huge murder case, and she was afraid for Rose's life. Rose was secretly hooking up with a rich married man named Charles Mahoney, and Annalise wanted to bring him down for another murder and involved Rose when she didn't need to. Charles Mahoney was dead set on not letting anyone ever find out about his mistress, and we can assume she died whenever Mahoney found out Rose was talking with Annalise and assumed other federal agents. This was all going on around the time of Annalise's pregnancy, as well, and her and Sam were expecting a boy. Back to the present, Laurel and Frank have a talk, and Frank tells her about Lila's murder, and she doesn't know what to think. The episode closes with Connor receiving an email from someone anonymous, showing them running through the woods covered in blood the night of the mansion incident. Episode 12. It's a trap. The episode starts with flashbacks showing Annalise and Rose meeting at the park that day we saw a little bit ago. We can tell Rose is hesitant to testify because she knows how dangerous Charles Mahoney is, but Annalise assures her that she will be protected by the DA and the feds. The feds have wanted to convict Mahoney for years for various crimes, this time being capital murder. On the day she is set to testify, she never shows up. Back in present day, Annalise gathers everyone together to try and track down where the blackmail email came from. They then discover that Philip was the one that sent the email. Yeah, big shocker there. And he threatens to go to the police unless they pay him $1 million. After talking with Nate, Annalise thinks Philip is bluffing and doesn't want to give in to the cash settlement. Shortly after the money deadline passes, Annalise receives a video of her and Nate hooking up the night before and says he's sure the DA would love to see this. Wes is finally released from the hospital, so him and Laurel head to Cleveland to find out any more information they can on this Charles Mahoney fella. While researching there, Wes learns a lot about his mother's role in the trial and how she was one of the key witnesses they had. Wes then realizes that his mother didn't end her life as he has thought this whole time. She was killed for testifying against Mahoney, and he concludes that Annalise is to blame for her death, which makes sense as to why Annalise is so attached to Wes. Her guilt is racking up for taking away his mother from him. The episode closes with Laurel finding a document detailing Annalise was a suspect in Rose's death, but she doesn't show him. She does take the paper to keep, though. Episode 13. Something bad happened. Wes goes to meet with his therapist as a kid and wants to remember what happened the night his mother died and how he acted to the news. All he is told is that he was the one to discover her body that night, and the therapist asks him why he is so dead set on getting the answers all these years later, and it might not be the best thing to be focusing on as he can't change it. Meanwhile, Laurel has confronted Annalise about everything and shows her the paper she found. Annalise yells at her if Wes wants to come ask him if she killed his mom. He needs to do it himself. She thinks Wes put Laurel up to it. Well, Wes goes to talk to her a little bit later, but she isn't home, so he snoops around in her office. Wes finds the piece of paper that Laurel took from the library, and on the paper shows Wes was a suspect for his mom's murder as well. When the police arrive to the scene, Wes was bloody standing over her dead body very creepily, and he wonders if maybe he did do it, and Sam isn't the only person he's killed. A flashback shows Annalise showing up to talk to Rose after she no-showed the trial, and out of nowhere, Rose stabs herself in the neck, and Annalise leaves right before Wes gets home, and this is when he finds her body and tries helping her, but gets blood all over himself. Now we know why Annalise was so filled with guilt, and she was so adamant on having Wes in her class and in the Keating 5. She took his mother away from him pretty much, and she feels obligated to be there for him. In the present day, Annalise decides to give the cops the laptop with the blackmail email from Philip in exchange for immunity, and at first they don't agree. The police then do a search warrant in the Keating house, and by some smart lawyering Annalise does, she finds a way to make everything in the house inadmissible in court as the search warrant wasn't completed ethically. Annalise then goes to talk with Wes at his apartment, and he isn't there, but someone else is. Philip then grabs her and kidnaps her. Episode 14. There's my baby. To kick off the penultimate episode, Annalise escapes from Philip and goes straight to the police station to report him. Wes and Eve eventually join her, and Annalise gets everyone together and tells them no one is allowed to be alone until Philip has been taken in by the authorities. Nate then shows up as well and informs them that Caleb has disappeared out of thin air now. And they know he isn't with Catherine, as Catherine was found guilty of Sinclair's murder that they framed her for. Michaela thinks this had to be Philip and is adamant they find him immediately, as she is starting to have feelings for him. Falling in love with your client who is on trial for murder is a choice, to say the least. The DA calls everyone in for questioning, but get nowhere as they don't say much. Bonnie recently found out Frank was the one that killed Lila, and they get into a little fight with each other until Annalise interjects. An angry Bonnie asks Annalise why she protects Wes so much more than everyone else, and this makes her mad, so she orders everyone to leave except Wes. Annalise tells Wes how she blames herself for Rose's death and explains to Wes how Rose really did do it to herself, but gives him the reasons why she wanted to die. She also was on the verge of being deported, and her life was a complete mess at the time. We also see in flashbacks that a distressed pregnant Annalise was on her way to tell the feds everything about Mahoney, but she got into a car wreck and lost her baby. She also tells Wes that Mahoney assaulted Rose and how he is Wes's real father. In the meantime, the Keating Five go out drinking and Laurel gets pretty drunk, and later in the night, she goes to the Keating house and tells Annalise that Frank was the one that killed Lila. Annalise didn't know this yet. She thought it was Sam. Episode 15. Anime. Season Finale. Annalise, being completely shocked by the information, packs her bags and heads back to Tennessee to be with her mother. Back in Philly, Nate finds out that there is an arrest warrant out for Annalise, and no one really knows why. They want Oliver to hack into the police database and see if he can find out why there's a warrant out there, but he is hesitant to do anything illegal. Nate heads down to Tennessee to inform Annalise about it, and he meets the family and stays for an awkward dinner. Oliver is able to uncover that the reason Annalise has a warrant is because there is an information telling them everything that she has done, and he deduces that the information is none other than Caleb. When Annalise gets back to Philly, she turns herself into the police and then also gives them valuable information that proves Caleb was the real killer of the Hapstalls and Catherine and Philip were innocent of that crime. When Caleb finds out that he has been ousted as a murderer, he ends his time in the How to Get Away with Murder universe. Catherine is then released as she is innocent, and she says it all makes sense now and the clues were there the whole time, but she was in love with him and didn't think he could murder anyone. We then get a flashback showing Frank was bribed by the Mahoneys to spy on Annalise to make sure she didn't get Rose to testify. This is what led to the Mahoneys having that car accident, and it wasn't an accident at all. This is what caused Annalise to lose her and Sam's baby. Frank admitted to Sam what he did, but Sam didn't want to tell Annalise and break her heart. She would have disowned Frank. But this is some dirt Sam had on Frank and was the reason Frank killed Lila for Sam. He owed him one. The season ends with Wes making his way to New York so he can confront his father Mahoney. After revealing that he is his son, Mahoney is shot in the head. And that is how Season 2 ends of this wild show. We'll have the later seasons uploaded soon, so I hope you can check those ones out as well. Thanks for watching.